The silk of her veil was still settling against her hair. The last of the guests were finding their seats in the gilded ballroom of the Everly Hotel. A string quartet was midway through a classical piece, the notes weaving through the gentle hum of conversation. Chloe's bouquet of peonies trembled in her grasp, but not from bridal jitters. A cold dread had taken root. The groom, Liam, was absent. More tellingly, so was his mother, Eleanor. With a placid smile, Chloe excused herself from her bridesmaids. "Just need a bit of air," she murmured. The door to the private study was ajar. She paused, heart hammering. Inside, she glimpsed Liam and his mother, Eleanor, in a scene that made her stomach twist, an intimacy that should never have been hers to witness. A wave of betrayal and shock washed over her. She slapped a hand over her mouth to trap the gasp in her throat. Tears blurred her vision as she stumbled back down the grand staircase, past the flowered arch where she was to be married, and vanished from the hotel. For an hour and a half, the crowd of 150 guests grew restless. Whispers swelled into concerned murmurs. The coordinator's smile became strained. The officiant checked his phone repeatedly. Jokes about cold feet died quickly. Where was the bride? The groom had reappeared, flushed and offering weak excuses, but his mother was nowhere to be seen. When Chloe finally reappeared, it was not at the ceremony site, but in the heart of the reception. The white gown was gone, replaced by a tailored ink-black suit. Her expression was not one of sorrow, but of chilling resolve. In her hand was a single, small, silver flash drive. She walked straight up to the media team controlling the projector. No words exchanged, just a nod. And then the room went silent. The music stopped. And what played next would leave the 150 guests frozen in place. Grown men buried their faces in their hands. Women shrieked and clutched their chests, one collapsing to the floor in a dead faint. The shock was not just scandalous, it was soul-crushing, because what she revealed was something even she hadn't planned for. Now let's rewind. Who was she? Who was he? And why did none of this happen by accident? Her name was Chloe Bennett. To the small, affluent town of Crestwood, she was a quiet programmer who worked remotely from her apartment. Soft-spoken, observant, she spent her evenings bird-watching in the local park and reading with her cat curled in her lap. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy, she didn't even post much on social media. But ask anyone who knew her closely, and they'll tell you. She loved deeply, trusted fully, and believed that honesty was everything. She was the kind of woman who remembered her fiancé Liam's coffee order perfectly, who learned about luxury cars just to understand his world, the kind who left encouraging notes in his briefcase. To the outside world, Chloe had it all. A picture-perfect engagement, a charming soon-to-be husband who sold luxury cars, and a wedding that was set to be the most beautiful Willow Ridge had ever seen. Guests were flying in from 6 different states. Everything was arranged. Everything was controlled. But maybe that was the first warning sign, because Chloe wasn't controlling. His mother, Eleanor, was. The wedding day dawned bright and clear. Chloe's stomach was in knots, so she skipped the elaborate breakfast tray and sipped instead on a simple glass of water. By 10:05 a.m., her hairstylist was weaving pearls into her updo. The photographer arrived at 11:30 to capture the final touches, her mother fastening the pearl necklace, the bridesmaids laughing as they helped her into the gown just after noon. But as 1 p.m. approached, attention settled over the bridal suite. The groom was late. More worryingly, so was his mother. The best man's text to Liam went unanswered. At 1:45, with only 15 minutes until the ceremony, Chloe smoothed her dress and told her maid of honor, "I need to find Liam. I'll be right back." The search she embarked on would never be captured by a photographer's lens. Later, she would describe it as a cold certainty that settled in her bones. She climbed the stairs to the hotel's private wing, the sounds of the gathering below fading away. The hallway was silent, except for a low murmur from a door left slightly open. She didn't need to push it wide. The glimpse she caught was enough. A tangle of limbs, a familiar possessive whisper from Eleanor. The world narrowed to that sliver of light from the doorway. In that moment, something in Chloe didn't break. It solidified. She stepped back, her hand flying to her mouth to seal in the horror. She didn't make a sound. She simply turned, descended the stairs, and slipped out a service entrance, unseen. Where she went for the next 90 minutes is a mystery. But when she returned to the Everly, the quiet programmer was gone, replaced by a woman of terrifying resolve. At exactly 5:17 p.m., the grand doors to the reception hall swung open. The chatter and clinking of glasses ceased instantly. A waiter froze, a tray of champagne flutes hovering in midair. Standing in the doorway was a silhouette no one recognized. A woman in an impeccably tailored smart suit the color of charcoal, a wide-brimmed hat shattering her face, and oversized sunglasses that hid her eyes completely. She moved with a purposeful, silent stride across the marble floor, her heels clicking like a countdown. The guests parted for her, unsure. She walked straight to the media booth and placed a small black flash drive on the table. Then, in one fluid motion, she removed the hat and sunglasses. A collective gasp rippled through the room. "My God, isn't that Chloe?" someone muttered. Her face was bare, her expression unreadable. She nodded once to the technician. The screen above them flickered to life. What followed was a chilling chronicle of betrayal, captured during the months of wedding planning at Chloe's apartment. The first clip showed the three of them reviewing seating charts. When Chloe got up to fetch more paper, the camera caught Eleanor leaning over to whisper in Liam's ear, her hand stroking the back of his neck in a way that was far too intimate. In another, Chloe was on the phone with the florist, her back turned, while on the sofa, Eleanor laced her fingers with Liam's, holding his hand with a possessive stillness. The most damning clip was from the morning of Chloe's spa day with her friends. She had left Liam and Eleanor at her apartment. The timestamp showed 9:17 a.m. The camera, facing the hallway, showed Eleanor emerging from Chloe's bedroom, stretching lazily, wearing nothing but one of Liam's dress shirts. She walked into the living room with a casual, proprietary air. A moment later, Liam himself followed out of the same bedroom, shirtless, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The evidence was relentless and cleverly captured, showing how they used the most mundane moments of Chloe's presence as cover for their illicit exchanges. Guests recoiled. One woman vomited into her purse, but Chloe just stood there, a statue amidst the chaos she had unleashed. When the screen finally went black, the silence was heavier than any noise. She didn't speak. She simply turned and walked out, leaving the 150 guests to grapple with the horrifying truth that had been unfolding right under the nose of the woman they had come to celebrate. For a full 30 seconds after the door closed behind Chloe, no one in the ballroom moved or spoke. It was as if the entire wedding party had been encased in ice. The silence was finally broken by the sound of a chair scraping back. Liam's uncle stood up, his face ashen. He didn't look at anyone, just stared at the door his niece had walked through, his silence speaking volumes. Because the fallout had only just begun. The footage hadn't simply exposed an affair, it had detonated a bomb under the family's carefully constructed facade.
In the days that followed, memories surfaced like shrapnel. A cousin recalled seeing Eleanor's car parked outside Liam's condo at 2 a.m. months ago. A friend of Chloe's admitted she'd always found Eleanor's constant presence suffocating. But the real explosion happened the next morning, when a cell phone recording of the reception screen was leaked online. By lunchtime, it had millions of views. News outlets picked up the story, dubbing it the shattered wedding. But Chloe was already gone. She deleted her social media, cleared out her apartment, and vanished. Rumors placed her everywhere from a silent retreat in Switzerland to a quiet coastal town in Maine, but no sighting was ever confirmed. Eleanor released a sterile, lawyer-approved statement expressing heartbreak over the private matter. Liam disappeared entirely, resigning from the family dealership. A neighbor later claimed to see him loading a single suitcase into his car in the middle of the night. The Everly Hotel, scarred by the scandal, quietly declined any future bookings from the Hartman family. Guests who were there said the experience changed them. One described it as witnessing a public execution of the truth. But the most poignant reaction came from the Hartmans' former longtime chauffeur. When asked, he simply said, "That family had too many secrets festering behind closed doors. The boy was never right after his father passed. The mother, she filled a space that should have stayed empty." The silence that Chloe left behind in the ballroom was a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor Hartman's money and influence rushed in to fill the space, not with noise, but with a calculated, suffocating quiet. It began with a series of impeccably worded cease and desist letters sent from a prestigious law firm whose name alone commanded fear, to every major news outlet and popular social media account that had shared the wedding footage. The language was cold, precise, and threatening. The video was labeled a maliciously edited deepfake, a criminal invasion of privacy, and a targeted act of emotional abuse by a psychologically compromised individual. The narrative was clear. Chloe was not a victim, but a villain. A spurned woman who had weaponized a beautiful mother-son bond, a bond forged in the shared trauma of losing a husband and father. For a brief, eerie moment, it worked. The roaring media circus faltered. Major networks, wary of legal battles, paused their coverage. Talk show hosts moved on to the next scandal. In the comment sections, a wave of skeptical voices emerged, doubt expertly seated. "It does seem awfully convenient, doesn't it? How did she have cameras everywhere? Seems like a setup." Another added, "A mother comforting her son is not a crime. Poor family." The immense gilded wall of the Hartman fortune was proving formidable, slowly but surely whitewashing the horrifying truth that 150 people had witnessed with their own eyes. But Chloe Bennett had not been a mere participant in her life. She had been her architect and systems analyst. She thought in code, in backups, and in fail-safes. While Eleanor was buying silence, Chloe's final protocol was about to execute. 3 weeks after the wedding, a nondescript cardboard box, bearing no return address, arrived at the office of the Boston Globe's investigative journalism desk. Inside, protected by layers of bubble wrap, was a single unmarked flash drive and a letter from a lawyer based in a different state. The letter stated, clearly and without emotion, that his firm had been retained months prior to Miss Chloe Bennett. Their sole instruction was a dead man's switch. If following the event of her wedding, a coordinated public relations or legal campaign was launched to discredit her character, this package was to be couriered immediately to the most reputable investigative newspaper the lawyer could identify. The flash drive contained a digital copy of the entire composition notebook, each page scanned to PDF. It also held raw, unedited audio files that matched the timestamps in the journal. The journal's entries were no longer just chilling observations. They were now evidence. Reporters pored over the clinical notations, an entry that read, "Liam claimed he was at the dealership audit all night. Security logs show his key card scanned him out at 8:03 p.m. Eleanor's car logged entering the garage at 8:17 p.m. was followed by a footnote, cross-reference with Hartman Consolidated Q4 financials, discrepancy in inventory write-offs. Another note, dated around the anniversary of the father's death, simply said, E told L, we can't ever let them look too closely at that night. The insurance was the easy part. L was agitated, said it was an accident. E replied, it's what we needed it to be. This was no longer a story about a salacious affair. The Boston Globe's headline, published a week later, was a thunderclap. Shattered wedding exposes web of deceit. New evidence prompts reopening of tycoon's death investigation. The fallout was absolute and merciless. The Hartman luxury dealership was shuttered by state regulators the next day, a temporary measure pending a full financial audit. The facade of the grieving, dignified widow and her son evaporated. Paparazzi staked out their known properties,
But the houses remained dark. They had vanished, ghosts in their own ruined empire. The story took on a new, darker life. True crime podcasts dissected the father's fatal sailing accident. Former business associates gave anonymous quotes about Charles Hartman's suspicions regarding the company books before his death. The public's fascination turned from lurid gossip to grim scrutiny. Chloe had not just exposed a taboo relationship. She had pulled a single thread and unraveled an entire world of corruption and potential crime. She had won a total, devastating victory. But from wherever she was hiding, watching the digital ashes of the Hartman legacy swirl online, the victory likely felt hollow. She had slain a dragon, but she knew better than anyone that dragons thrash most violently in their final moments. And the silence from the Hartman camp was no longer one of control, but of a predator licking its wounds and plotting its revenge. The real danger was no longer the public lie, but the very private, very desperate rage she had left in her wake. 6 months later, the world had moved on, but for the woman now living under the name Clara, the identity Chloe Bennett had painstakingly built, her past was a shadow that never left. She had found a fragile peace in a remote coastal town in northern Maine, where the gray expanse of sky met the Atlantic and the wind carried both solitude and secrets. Her small cottage perched on a cliff, its windows facing the endless sea. Here she was just another quiet programmer. Her only companions were the gulls outside and the well-thumbed birding guide on her kitchen table. Her days followed precise routines. Mornings were for coding, afternoons for long walks along the rugged coastline, evenings for silence broken only by the waves. She had won her freedom, but victory felt heavier than she expected. Every glimpse of a happy couple in town, every memory of what she had lost, punctured the quiet. One evening, a nor'easter gathered offshore. Shadows stretched across the cottage as twilight faded. Clara had just closed her laptop, feeling the usual prickle of unease at the back of her neck. She had dismissed it as paranoia. The phone buzzed sharply on the coffee table. She picked it up. The cinder field was blank. The words appeared all at once. "You really thought you could destroy my boy's life, burn down everything his father built, and hide away in Seal Cove, Chloe Bennett. Did you think I wouldn't find you? We have unfinished business. A mother's work is never done." Time froze. The wind died in the room. Seal Cove, her alias, her little bird cage of a life, exposed. This was Eleanor, not law, not rumor. This was a predator, patient and precise, closing in. Clara's fingers trembled over the screen, and then, as if the thread itself had been smoke, the message began to vanish from the phone. Letters dissolved from the edges inward. 3 seconds later, the screen was blank. The storm outside broke, rain lashing against the windows, but inside the cottage, a harsher storm raged. Clara was no longer safe. The cage door had opened, and Eleanor knew exactly where she was. What do you think Chloe should do next? Did she even make the right decision by exposing their secret publicly? Or should she have left the relationship long before the marriage? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Share the location you're watching from. We want to see how far our stories have reached around the world. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next story.